transformed into an urbanized zone of about 60 hectares, protected by an impressive wall. The city appeared to be preparing for a battle, undoubtedly with the Assyrian Empire. The archaeologist Ronnie Reich has been involved in excavations here for many years. He is a specialist on the city of Jerusalem. In order to appreciate how seriously the Assyrian threat was taken by the small kingdom of Judah, we have to enter into the bowels of the city. Jerusalem's only permanent source of water flowed outside the city walls and could not be accessed if the city was under siege. To maintain supplies to Jerusalem, King Hezekiah launched an extraordinary project for a tunnel that would bring water to reservoirs situated inside the ramparts.
And the tunnel goes from here for over 500 meters, cut from both sides. They met in the middle, all in the rock.
Well, this is a real engineering achievement, because two groups which were cutting in a tunnel which is not straight but has an S-shaped outline. Yeah. They went like this and met here. They could have cut one next to the other and one above the other. Two types of arrows, and they avoided both of them. And we still don't have an adequate explanation how this was done, but this certainly is.
But we have the inscription of the two groups working with the axes and hewing the rock, and then they meet in the great moment when they hear each other.
Carved into the rock, this inscription in ancient Hebrew commemorates the meeting of the two teams. The Bible, it seems, also refers to this event in the Book of Kings.
This ancient Hebrew inscription is really one of the most important pieces of evidence we have for the rise of Judah as a kingdom. So it represents both the engineering that was possible by the kingdom and also the attempt of the kingdom to record that act in an official way, in an official inscription. And so this really brings us to a time when the kingdom was centralized, when Jerusalem was a city that was administered by royal officials that had the power and the level of literacy to record their achievements and their history.
In this way, a tiny kingdom lost in the hills of Judah became a genuine state in a very short period of time. It probably hoped to play an important role in the region, but its fate was already sealed.
After the fall of the kingdom in the north, only one buffer state remained between Assyria and Egypt, the tiny state of Judah. The people of Judah wavered between the idea that they should submit to the Assyrians and the idea that they could remain independent with the support of Egypt. At some point, they went too far, and Sennacherib, Sargon's son, decided to put an end to the situation.
It was 701 BC. The new Assyrian king, Sennacherib, marched on Judah at the head of a huge army. When they reached Lachish, the second largest city of the kingdom, they laid siege to it. Today, Lachish is an artificial tell or mound. In the 8th century BC, it was one of Judah's administrative capitals and the site of a memorable battle. Evacuations carried out along its fortifications have revealed evidence of a violent confrontation. David Usishkin, who heads the excavations, is a professor of archaeology at the Tel Aviv University.
The Assyrians, when they came to Judah, Sennacherib came to Lachish. He didn't go to Jerusalem. Now, why did he come to Lachish and not straight to Jerusalem? In my view, he wanted to show an exemplary conquest. He wanted to show the people of the country what he can do and what he can do to Jerusalem. And in my view, he decided to destroy this fortress of King Hezekiah, and then he sent army to Jerusalem to negotiate with him and to come to some agreement with him.
Despite its powerful fortifications, Lachish was defeated. To avoid the same result in Jerusalem, Judah paid a levy and became one of Assyria's vassal states. But as is shown by the archaeological evidence, this submission to its powerful neighbor in the north led, paradoxically, to an unprecedented economic boom. Excavations corresponding to this period in all the sites tell the same story and describe the same phenomenon. Judah, controlled by the Assyrian authorities, participated in Arabian trade and in the production of oil on a very large scale. At the same time, a genuine government was set up. Our books of stone have shed light on the birth of a state.
Lamelech, belonging to the king, the city of Hebron. Lamelech, Socho, belonging to the king, the city of Socho in the Shephelah. It represents developed administration. First of all, because the storages are of about the same volume, the same quantity. They are standardized. And secondly, the seal impressions too are standardized. So what you have here is evidence for some sort of state administration. A person, a family, just somebody out there in the village doesn't do things like that. So all the evidence fall together to the same conclusion. Full-blown state in Judah for the first time in the late 8th century.
This new state of affairs would modify the geopolitical landscape of the region. The Assyrians, overcome by internal problems, left the Levant around 630 BC.
The end of the Neo-Assyrian Empire was characterized by serious problems, in particular in Babylonia. The majority of Assyria's military forces were therefore focused on this territory. As a result, the Assyrians were perceived as being much less present, much less available in the surrounding areas, which obviously made this an attractive time for liberation movements.
With the Assyrians weakened, an audacious project began to take root in Judah to conquer the territory of the ancient kingdom of Israel. It is in this context that the confrontation between Egypt and the Exodus, as it is described in the Bible, begins to make sense. A king by the name of Josiah reigned in Jerusalem. He was the great-grandson of Hezekiah and dreamed of a great pan-Israelite kingdom, a truly unified kingdom. The Bible is exceedingly generous in its praise of this king.
Never before had there been a king like Josiah, who turned to Yahweh with all his heart and soul and might, obeying all the laws of Moses. That is what the Hebrew Bible had to say of Josiah. He's perhaps not a very well-known king, but he was quite extraordinary according to the Bible.
The authors of the biblical text tell how Josiah ordered work to be carried out in the Temple of Jerusalem. This is a very important point in terms of our investigation.
During these works, the great priest discovered a book. He announced that the book of the law has been discovered. The book was given to the king, who, on reading it, tore off all his clothes as a sign of mourning or consternation. He then undertook a major reform which included the prohibition of all other places of worship, thereby making Jerusalem the only legitimate place of worship.
Was a book really discovered, or was this just a pretext to launch a project that had been envisaged for some time? No one knows. But as a result of this discovery, Josiah launched the most radical reform in the kingdom's history. Experts believe that this book, which has been given the name the Book of the Covenant, was in fact the book of Deuteronomy, the fifth book of the Pentateuch. The reform gave priority to the laws that were given to Moses on Mount Sinai and centralized the region in Jerusalem. But was this Josiah's only objective?
Josiah needed centralization of power, strong administration, complete control of the state. One way to do that was to centralize cult, to do this reform of cult, which would lead back to the idea, to the pan-Israelite idea, that all Israelites must worship one God in one place, in Jerusalem. This is how, if you do this, and you demolish the cult places in the countryside, definitely you control better the economy, you control better the state, you better control the state, and you can achieve your goals in a better and faster way.
Josiah therefore had a political objective, the creation of a great unified kingdom. But the winds of history would once again turn. After a long period of dormancy, Egypt renewed with its imperial ambitions. Pharaoh Psammetichus I also had a dream: to return Egypt to the glory of its former pharaohs, such as Ramses II. Egypt would take control of part of Canaan that had been relinquished by Assyria.
For Josiah, Egypt was not only it was the real threat. It was the only obstacle in front of him which could have prevented him for fulfilling his ideology of the great Israel. Egypt was there, and at the same time it had its own ideology, its own dreams, its own wishful thinking, and it was the only obstacle.
Judah and Egypt were on the verge of a military conflict. What happened then? Did Josiah intend to use the text to convey a message of hope? A story that would show that a small people could triumph over the greatest of empires, as Israel had triumphed over Egypt when its people were led by a great man with the backing of God and the law?
The story of Exodus is the story of a liberation that goes beyond the flight from Egypt. In order for the liberation to be complete, it was necessary to receive the law. In the Pentateuch, this law is received outside of any political institution, whether it be royalty or the state. It is thus a law that is given to the people by Moses.
Implicitly compared to Moses in the biblical story, a man would take on the role of both liberator and of lawmaker, King Josiah. For the law would play a central role in uniting the Israelites, and would later unite all those who made a claim to Judaism. The law that was given to the people as it appeared in the Ten Commandments and in Deuteronomy would put into writing the bond that existed between Jews and their God. The law seen as a covenant, a holy covenant. Since that time, this law and its transmission and study constitutes the second pillar of Judaism. A religion unites a people and its God, as in the time of Josiah, by a covenant that is read and interpreted for all time. Our investigation has shown us the role of the patriarchs in the biblical story. This time, it has established the second pillar of what was to become Judaism, a society united by its laws, with the concepts of oppression and liberation as its background. In the next episode, our investigation will lead us to a rereading of the story of the conquest of Canaan, and will see us following in the footsteps of the Bible's great kings, David and Solomon. According to the biblical text, Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt to the land of Canaan, the Holy Land. We see them reconquer the lands of their ancestors and gradually become a sovereign people in their land.
The first verses of the book of Joshua say the following. After the death of Moses, the servant of the Lord said to Joshua the son of Nun, Moses' minister, Moses my servant is dead. Now therefore arise, go over this Jordan, you and all this people, into the land which I am giving to them, to the people of Israel. Every place that the sole of your foot will tread upon, I have given to you, as I promised to Moses. This is the beginning of the great saga, the great epic of the conquest of Canaan in the book of Joshua. And the Bible tells the story step by step. From here to Jericho, from Jericho to Ai, from Ai to the war with the kings of the south, and then to Hatzor and the kings of the north. And it's a wonderful story, a great saga of war.
Tel Megiddo. This archaeological site will once again provide some keys to the authors of the Bible. The 25 strata found at the site cover 7,000 years of the history of Canaan. Will it allow us to find clues to the origins of the Israelites? Our two investigators, Israel Finkelstein and Neil Silberman, are writing a book that uses archaeological tools to re-examine the Bible's stories. The issue of the origin of the Israelites is at the heart of their investigation. In previous episodes, it was shown that the Exodus, the flight from Egypt, had left no trace, and that the land of Canaan was never conquered in military terms. So where do the Israelites come from? What approach should we take to our investigation? The Museum of Cairo contains a stele that describes a military campaign led by Pharaoh Merneptah against Canaan.